Please welcome to the stage Dr. Wendy Williams.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Wendy Williams, and I am so glad to be here today to talk with you about on refusal and recovery, what we learned from Black women about reclaiming our wellness at work. So I want to start us today where we're going to end, which is, you're welcome, right? We owe a debt to Black women because there's so much that we know and learn about how systems of oppression affect Black women, and we draw lessons and understandings about what that might mean for all of us. And so, you're welcome. And while that's a very big view of it, right, all Black women, there's also appreciation for very specific Black women. This is my grandmother. She's no longer with us, but her name is Aretha Mary Harris Odom. My grandmother was one generation from cotton fields and helped to support our family by cleaning the homes of white women whose husbands paid for her to clean the homes of their families in order to ensure that our family had what we needed to survive and make meaning of our own lives. The type of work that she did is very typical for Black women at the turn of the century when she was coming through and was raising my mother, who's sitting in the audience today. And so, while the work wasn't well paid, was pretty minuscule and pretty hard, cleaning up other people's dirt, it is what also created possibility and opportunity for my family, for me. It's one of the reasons why I stand before you right now. And the work that my grandmother did is not very different from the work that was available for many Black women to do, because the reality is that coming out of enslavement, there was a very narrow vision of what Black women, Black people could do to make money, to survive and take care of themselves. So a part of the New Deal, you may remember, were the Works Progress Administration, the WPA. And what they did was, gather stories and, really chronicle the American sort of positionality in the world at the time, and it created work for people. And these words were penned by a woman who's described as a Negro nurse in 1912, and for The Independent. And she wrote, and I'll read it to you, "To begin with then, I should say that more than 2/3 of the Negroes of the town where I live are menial servants of one kind or another. And besides that, more than 2/3 of the Negro women here, whether married or single, are compelled to work for a living as nurses, cooks, washerwomen, chambermaids, seamstresses, huckstresses, janitresses, and the like. I will say also that the condition of this vast host of poor colored people is just as bad as, if not worse than, it was during the days of slavery. Though today we are enjoying nominal freedom, we are literally slaves. And not to generalize, I will give you a sketch of the work I have to do, and I'm only one of many. Only one of many. And what is that work? That work, in my book, Black Women at Work, I call the care, coddling, and cleaning work. The care, coddling, and cleaning work. This is the work of cleaning up the dirt of our nation and the dirt of our homes. Labor dynamics in the US are premised on unpaid labor and work from unfree people on stolen land. That is the story of it. In business terms, you get a really high return on investment when you don't have to pay for the labor. And that is a form of stealing both land and life. So when I think about Black women at work, it's the trauma of Black people that is tethered to capitalism and the removal of indigenous folks to secure the land on which Black people would labor. The foundational betrayal on which all other dynamics of our labor and employment systems rest there. So when we think about things as being not that bad, or, you don't need to rest, you'll rest when you die, we're literally living on top of a legacy in which people didn't rest until they died. My people, your people. And we saw some of that happen during the pandemic. So when I talk about care, what does care look like now? Because as the woman, the Negro nurse, said, it's not as if it's slavery now, but there are ways in which it manifests currently. So think about during the pandemic and how we positioned teachers. It was one of the first times in this country where we began to appreciate that as educators and teachers in our society, that they're actually pretty underpaid, very underpaid, have work, yeah, go ahead and clap about it, have work conditions that are very difficult, and we entrust them with our children. And yet, are entrusting them with our children are primarily so that they will babysit them so that the financial and the economic and business of our country can move forward. And we watched it all come to a standstill during the pandemic. And the coddling, that happened during the pandemic too. And I can take responsibility too. I also ordered food from my phone while somebody else went to the store for me, right? And participated in the cleaning theater, the sanitization theater of, pandemic, sanitizing things that come into your home from outdoors. And the cleaning. Now, I could talk about the sanitization, but I also talk about the type of cleaning that we're asking diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals to do with our American society right now about the dirty racism that affects all of us. So the more things change, the more they do stay the same. And what I would argue is that we can see that not just in descriptively, but by the numbers. Black women make up 80% of the women in the workforce between the ages of 16 and 64. Black women, or 80% rather of black women, are the primary wage earners in their family, despite the fact that they can expect, no matter their positionality, to earn between 36% less than white men and 12% less than white women who have similar education and status. And black women can expect, no matter her role in her work, to have a cumulative loss over the course of her career of $1 million. It's in the numbers. Everyday black women and women of tremendous status grapple with these inequities. Those inequities have a financial bottom line and cost. Black women do not get the class and power privilege of being in high status positions. In fact, sometimes they get another type of treatment, treated worse because you're operating outside of your place. Know your place. Heard those words? Oh, excuse me. So, in my work, I talk about the power of refusal and recovery. And there are 4 phenomena that I've seen happen across multiple spaces and with different black women. I belabor the point in my book that these conditions, can situating popular public examples alongside personal narratives and the work in the fields of psychology, sociology, legal studies, and American studies, because they so powerfully tell the tale of how our society has treated black women and what we learned about their work experiences. Black women can experience and can expect to feel passed over in their work. They can expect to have to wonder whether or not they're supposed to be here in any place. They can expect to be shushed, and they can expect to find themselves at a crossroads and have to make a decision about what they're going to do. So, who likes Beyonce? Who watched the 2017 Grammy Awards? So what we notice there is, right, that there's this moment where a person whose artistic expression and work ethic and all of it is undoubtedly supreme. And at the same time, when she's up for one of the highest awards, the Album of the Year in 2017, she gracefully is clapping. Who knows what she's thinking in that moment, but she was passed over. To be passed over is to have a loss of opportunity, acknowledgement, or recognition due to a lack of investment in one's growth and development. Even though in our institutions, in our organizations, we rely heavily on the labor of black women. Adele said on that night, "I can't believe I got this award. Your album was my Album of the Year." Am I even supposed to be here? Oftentimes we're put in a position of having to question whether or not we are where we are and if we're supposed to be in those spaces because of the onslaught of microaggressions, intersectional microaggressions, constantly putting us in the persistent and toxic environments that make us question, is this even a place for me? And I picture here our forever FLOTUS, Michelle Obama, because again, this happens for folks in powerful positions, but it's also true that for many of the women, young women sitting in this audience, and maybe others, you experience this too. You don't have to be Michelle Obama to wonder about that. And the reality is that, on the day of the inauguration of the 45th president, as she and her husband were preparing to leave Washington, D.C. and go on their merry way, she has a look of wondering, was this even worth it? Shush. Now, when I started writing my book in 2018, if you can believe it, a pandemic happened, so it took a little longer to finish. I was really struck by and was inspired by a phenomena that I began to see with political journalists at the time, and also some politicians who were black women. It was very public, it was very visible. The idea that they would be shushed, either willfully or habitually, not being heard or told to stop, So in this image is a photo of Sean Spicer. They were in a White House press briefing, and April Ryan, again, political journalist with over 25 years of experience. And she actually wasn't even saying a word. She was just like shaking her head because he was not telling the truth at the time. And he told her that she needed to stop. He literally looked at her, called her name, and told her, you need to stop shaking your head. Even her nonverbal behaviors, her nonverbal communication was too loud. We also shush Black women and shush everyone when we misattribute their contribution to the story that we're telling ourselves, right? And so you may have sat in spaces and around tables where she just said that, and for some reason, someone is just taking credit for what has just come out of her mouth. And at the crossroads. So Shonda Rhimes of Olivia Pope and Annalise Keating fame, she had this very public moment a few years ago where she was in the process of renegotiating her contract with the Disney Corporation. And her family, you know, the Disney Corporation put on those television shows, what is it, Thank God It's Thursday or something like that. Billions of dollars made on behalf of her work. Ultimately, she was in a position where she felt like she had to leave because these folks were not valuing the work that she did. And apparently she asked for a simple, comp tickets for Disneyland. You know, she works for Disney. They're expensive, but I'm sure that the company could have passed them on. And they said, hey, don't you have enough? So the negotiations were going in such a way that they felt she was asking for too much. Sometimes you have to leave. Sometimes you have to part ways. You have to make a decision to avoid or end working within contexts that are particularly toxic. And there are reasons why we do that. Sometimes it's overwork. I call it the phenomena of slash and burn, right? This idea that the idea of leaning in as a Black woman sometimes means taking on more than one job and being paid for just one of them. Trying to show that you're a team player while at the same time being in the position of being overworked and undercompensated for what you're doing. And in working like that, what you are doing at times is tolerating the types of conditions that can actually make you physically and mentally unwell. So the stress, the depression, the anxiety that we feel, the inability to sleep, the heart disease and the diabetes that are also a function of, you know, these types of mental health challenges too. And the last that I will say about this is that sometimes leaving is necessary because your presence is evidence of something that's not actually happening within the environments that you're working in. This morning I was presenting with my students and we were talking about the fact that, you know, as a Black woman, when I'm in leadership spaces, people may think that, oh, well, because Dr. Williams is there, that's a safe space for me. They may take meaning for that. They may say that because this country had a Black president and a Black wife who was in the White House, that this is a safe country for Black people. Would that be correct? Sometimes, I know, sometimes, it's like call and response. Sometimes the reality is that oftentimes we can be operating beneath the harm of, you know, so much racialized and gendered harm. And so that's something to think about. And so I know that I have made decisions in different contexts that I would rather not send the message and gaslight people who are looking for an opportunity in a space and see me as an indicator of safety when really it is not. Let's just take a breath. I know I can be a lot, but it's okay, you'll be fine. So we actually have the tools and the possibility of really getting up and around all of this, because the fact is that our ancestors have done so much work that we can learn from and be taught from. And so what I'd like to share with you are two specific examples of where I draw some of that background, and also to think about what that might look like in our lives. So when I talk about my ancestors, I'm talking about Afro-Indigenous refusal strategies and Afro-Indigenous people. So one of my ancestors is Harriet Tubman. She was the first Black person and woman general of the U.S. Union Army. She led a successful raid, and the recounts of history are uncertain. They either say about 400 or about 700, but she freed about that many enslaved people at the Combahee River in South Carolina. Who's heard of the Combahee River? Yeah, because you know that they're the women of the Combahee River Collective, and you know that they named themselves after Harriet Tubman because they wanted to be associated with and take inspiration from a woman who freed her people through struggle. But there's also the ways in which indigeneity and indigenous practices inform our work. And what I know from my indigenous siblings in the field and in the world is that it's not enough to just say indigenous, but to be specific. So I draw heavily on Audra Simpson's work and the refusal practices of the Mohawk Kanawiki people. And what Dr. Simpson talks about is the ways in which her people, because that's her community, the ways in which her people sort of maneuver and avoid and really balance, being in relationship with the federal government while also, trying to get around and away from settler colonialism, because there's been a lot of abuse in the context of treaties and documentation of agreements that aren't always respected or held on. And so from these pieces of work, there are 4 ways in which, from Afro-Indigenous perspectives and wisdom traditions, that we can pull out how refusal lands. Refusal is generative, refusal is social and affiliative, and refusal is not mere resistance, and refusal is willful and hopeful. So I'll take you through pretty quickly. So refusal is generative. What do we mean by that? The way I say it quite simply is that a good no can get you to a quality yes, right? A good no can get you to a quality yes. There are times when we allow for other people's agendas and perspectives to take up a little bit too much room in our organizing and addressing our lives. And so within the context of our work and our career development, how might we be getting in the way of being available for new ideas, new ways of being, new relationships with people and opportunities by saying yes to the things that we really want to say no to? We may or may not be able to leave our job. I don't want to suggest that that's an option for everybody because we have to be realistic. But sometimes the ways that we say no can be quiet and internal. Most recently, we've been talking about quiet quitting. Have you heard of this? The reality is that my ancestors have been quiet quitting for a long time because they couldn't just up and leave all the time, even though that's what you wanted to do. So what I'll say here is that it can start a conversation with how to manage one's time, one's energy and attention, and these types of boundaries that we set are the praxis and are the ways in which we get to more room for the things that we want to do. And sometimes it does mean that you do need to leave. Refusal is social and affiliative. What does that mean? I think about it with regard to and in the context of movement struggles. When I speak up, speak my truth, and speak for my rights, I am creating community because once I tell you what's in my heart, you can connect. Well, does that connect for me? And if it does, then we become one of 2, one of 3, one of 4. It creates community and connection. And it also disrupts those feelings of isolation and alienation that keep us in situations that are not good for us. And perhaps when we're in the context of our work environments, it can allow us to do something different to improve the work conditions that we're in. Because if we refuse as a group to be there, well, then that changes things. And refusal is not mere resistance. Now, resistance is good. I can tell you that my mother has had her own experiences of being really frustrated with me for going to protest and wondering if I'm going to come home okay, right? But what we want to say about resistance is this. It's okay to fight the power. It's important to speak up and to act out and to be in protest positionality and to be in that posture. But what I would argue is asserting yourself in reaction to what someone else has done is not you moving from and being authorized from your own perspective and what you want to see and do in the world. Resistance cedes power to those who would try to oppress you and can be distracting from what's important, from your own agenda. What refusal does for us is allows us to not recognize that other entity as having that power to diminish you and to stay focused in your perspective in terms of what you want to do. When you preserve your energy and your focus and your attention, you can put that toward and in the direction of your own health and healing. And finally, refusal is hopeful and willful. I go back to the idea that a good no does make room for a good yes. And that yes is the creation of space and opportunity to dream, to wonder out loud and with others, and to build out loud and with others. And that ultimately can put us in the position of recovery. So, what does refusal recover? Ultimately, it can and does recover you. You, us, all of us can get back to our full and wholesome humanity and have more of an opportunity to live in our full truth. So as I said, we will end by saying you're welcome. There are many learnings and lessons that we draw from Black women. We must attribute it to them, and we must be thankful and grateful to them. My name is Dr. Wendy Williams. On Refusal and Recovery, what we learn from Black women about reclaiming our wellness at work. You can find me in these places along with those logos. It was a pleasure to be with you today.